All right, let's get into it. Today's episode is entitled, I Wasn't Ever No Ugly Man. I wasn't ever no ugly man. And actually, before we dive right into it, let me just let you know that I appreciate you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. As I say in the intro, I do appreciate it. Thank you so very much. You don't have to take the time to listen or watch, depending on however you are getting this information, getting this podcast. But know that I truly do appreciate you. It took a while for me to figure out what I wanted to do as a podcast. And I say it took a while because I initially was thinking it was going to be this thing, and then it was going to be that thing, and then, oh no, it's going to be this thing. But then as I began to pray more about what my next steps need to be, this seemed so very natural, and I was so at ease with it all. And I got to be quick about this one because I've got to cook dinner very shortly before I get on my evening calls. I've got 2 calls this evening. So that title, I Wasn't Ever No Ugly Man, is an exact quote from my dad. And so that is what this episode is about. This episode is about my dad. And it's just so very interesting that at this stage in my life, I am a caregiver for my dad, considering how we have interacted with one another in the past. So let me first tell you about my dad. His name is John Kenneth. And oftentimes you'll hear me just referring to him as Kenny, or you'll hear me say his John Kenneth, his first and middle name. So my mom was 15 and my dad was 16 when they had me, when they conceived me, when I was born. And I won't go too deep into that right now because that's something I will talk about a little bit later. But just know that I heard someone say this earlier today, I grew up with my parents because they were so young. So we learned things together. So my dad's current condition, I'm sorry, I was playing with something and I need to stop because it was making noise. My dad's current condition and his prognosis. And if you haven't listened to the intro or to the previous episode, then you know that I am the caregiver for my dad, for my husband, and my 3-month-old Shih Tzu, Rain. And so if you hear a little whining and a little wiggling or something clinking, it's her. She's in here with me. So my dad's condition and his prognosis. My dad has stage 4 lung cancer that has metastasized to several places in his body, a few of which are the liner for the lungs, and his bones, and his spine, which of course is also a bone, but his spine. And the spine is actually a new development. They recently found a mass on his spine because he was in so much pain and he wasn't sure why. And just in the last couple of weeks, he was in the hospital and they did an MRI, a CAT scan, and found a mass on his spine. They found a broken, what is it called? Disc. They found a broken disc in his spine, and they believe it was broken by the mass that is on the spine. And it is also pinching a nerve, which is causing some of the pain that he is experiencing. Which is what took him to the ER this last time. Anyway, he was in a great deal of pain. So yes, he has stage 4 lung cancer that has metastasized to his lungs, to many places, but 3 of which were his lung liner, the bones, and now his spine. And my role as his caregiver is a little unorthodox. A couple of years ago, I went ahead and got life insurance on him because I knew that there was a great chance that he didn't have life insurance. And I knew that one of his sisters at one point in time had life insurance on him. And I knew at one point in time his mom, my grandmother, had life insurance on him. But my grandmother has since passed away. And at one time before her passing, one of his sisters sent me, this was back in 2013, sent me the life insurance application or something so that I could continue the life insurance. But my dad is a huge conspiracy theorist, and for a very long time did not want me to have his social security number. He didn't want any of us to have his social security number because he was so afraid that we would use it against him somehow. So for a very long time, and I'm not sure why the image is darkening, never mind. So a very long time I didn't have that information, so I could not continue the life insurance. So recently, in the last couple of years, I decided to go ahead and get life insurance for him. And I called him up one day and I said, hey, I want to get life insurance on you because I'm positive that you don't have it, and I want to make sure that if anything happens, or when it happens, not if, when it happens, that I am able to make certain that you are cared for properly when it's time to funeralize you, and we're not going to have the same situation that we had with my mom. And I'll talk about my mom and how I was a caregiver for her in a different episode in greater detail. But what I will say is this: when my mom passed away, I thought that she had an insurance policy. And in actuality, the policy had lapsed. Even though she had given me the payment and I mailed it in and they received it, I did not realize that the payment that she had given me was a past due payment. She was not current on her payments. So when I sent them the payment, it wasn't a current payment. It wasn't for the quarter that we were in at the time that I sent it. It was for the previous quarter. So when she passed, she actually ended up not having any insurance. Therefore, I had to raise money to funeralize my mother. So when I called my dad and I said, look, I want to get a policy on you, I explained to him why I wanted to get a policy on him. I did not want to have to do the same thing with him that I did with my mom. No matter the fact that he has siblings and other children that could have helped, I didn't want to go down that road. And surprisingly, he agreed. Surprisingly, he agreed. So I got on the phone with my insurance agent at the time and said, hey, look, my dad has agreed for me to get insurance on him. He's on the phone with us now. Let's go ahead and get this done before he changes his mind. So we got the insurance policy going, and that was back in 2019. I think either 2018 or 2019. I want to say 2019. So we got it going, and I've been paying it. It was 2019. I've been paying it, and it isn't inexpensive. It is actually costly to, now it's inexpensive to some, but it's costly to me when I compare it to what I pay for my insurance and for my husband's insurance. My dad's policy costs me more per month than my husband and mine combined. And I don't ask anyone for help with it at all. I just go ahead and pay it. So anyway, he agreed, we got it going. I have the policy, but instead of them listing me as someone that they could speak with when he was unable to speak, they had him as the only person that could make any changes or make any inquiries to the policy. So there have been a couple of times where I needed to talk with someone about his policy and they wouldn't talk to me. So I have asked my dad on more than one occasion to fill out the paperwork that needs to be completed so that they can talk with me when the time comes, or if I have any questions before. He's yet to do that. So that's one of the ways where I'm a caregiver for him. I have his life insurance policy. Another way that I'm a caregiver for him is I am also his medical power of attorney, and I am well aware of his care wishes should he become nonverbal. I know what it is that he wants to have done. Paperwork has been completed and all of that. So I know what it is that he wants. And so I handle that. Then in addition to that, now that he is at the stage that he's at, and I've spoken with his doctors, he's given them permission to speak with me. Now that he's at the stage that he's at, I am privy to the conversations that his doctors have with him. But he is in what they call hospice, meaning he is getting his final day's care, and all they're doing at this point is whatever it takes to make him comfortable, meaning pain relief, nursing care, caregiver, things like that. He has chosen, and this is why the cancer has gone, or one of the reasons why the cancer has taken over his body the way that it has, is because he has chosen not to have chemotherapy or radiation. That was his choice. And hey, that's his choice. It's his right. He is still in his right mind and well within his rights to choose not to have that kind of care. He didn't want the chemotherapy, he didn't want the radiation. However, when he went into the hospital this last time, he did agree to the radiation because they explained to him that if he did not get it, that the pain would be even more intense and that there would be nothing they could do to relieve the pain. So the radiation would help with shrinking the mass and relieving some of the pressure on the spine and the spinal cord, and hopefully relieve some of the pressure that is causing the pain that he's experiencing in his right leg, and in his lower back as well. So I am, again, the power of attorney. I am well aware of his care rights, his healthcare rights, or healthcare decisions. I have the DNR. I speak with all of the doctors. I speak with the social workers. I speak with those who handle his finances, because he does get benefits, and I speak with the nurses that come in to care for him while in hospice. He also chose not to go into a hospice care facility. He wants to do hospice at home. Again, well within his rights to do that. So he is doing hospice at home. So the nurses come out to him. There's another caregiver that comes out to him, and then he has a caregiver that comes out that's supposed to help him with, making sure that he eats, with cleaning the house, with doing his laundry, helping him bathe and getting him dressed, making sure that the medications outside of the heavy doses of medicines that he has to take, he's taking those. And it's been really very difficult because he's so very set in his ways. Some other things that were happening I had to take care of, and I'll get back to him being set in his ways. Some other things that were happening that I had to take care of. I had to take off work for a week to roll to Chicago and evict someone from his apartment. Maybe I'll talk about that in a totally different episode. But I had to go evict someone from his apartment because he had a squatter, an illegal squatter. And when I say illegal squatter, squatting is illegal anyway, but when I say illegal, I mean what he was doing was illegal while he was also a squatter in my dad's apartment. So I had to go make sure that they were clear on the fact that my dad has backup, and I am it. And he's got other family. He's not there by himself. He may be there in that apartment by himself. You may see him as a loner because he typically runs by himself, but he is not ever alone, ever. alone. So I had to take care of that as well. And again, that's maybe something that I'll get into greater detail later on in a different episode. So one of the things that we are finding very difficult to do, because my dad is so set in his ways, is getting him to understand that now he can't have it his way in certain situations, such as his caregiver. His caregiver is one of his friends and neighbors, and she's basically there to collect a check, and he's fine with that. He just wants the constant companion, someone to drink with, someone to, quite honestly, get high with. That is what she is there for. So she is collecting a paycheck to do the things that he absolutely needs to have done, but she's not doing them. And I know that people do this all the time. It's fraud. It is 100% fraud. And I, again, know that people do this all of the time. My dad is not the only person that I know of that is doing that or has done that. So the last report that I got was yesterday. The nurse called me upset because when she got there, my dad said he was hungry. He said that he was cold and that he needed to bathe. Now, he's hungry, but he's got a bowl of food sitting right there next to him that he can't eat because he's in an awkward position and didn't have the strength to sit himself up in the right position to eat. And at one point in time, he did have a backrest pillow that he no longer has because they decided that it was dirty and they weren't going to wash it, so they threw it away. According to him, via the nurse, he just throws his dirty clothes away instead of getting them washed, which was so disturbing to me because that is what the caregiver is there for. She is there to literally wash his clothes and clean his house, his apartment, and makes sure that he eats. That's what she's supposed to do, and she's not doing it. So now, in addition to the fact that he said he was hungry and he couldn't get into the right position, she said that he didn't have any clean sheets on his bed, and he didn't have covers, a blanket or anything on his bed, and that's why he was cold. So he's sitting there in shorts and covered up with one of the wet pads. And she was upset because she says, I've done everything that I can to help him, and I've asked why he's not getting the laundry done, and he said that, you know, his caregiver will take care of it, but they didn't have a laundry cart, and on and on and on. So she's telling me all of this stuff about why he's not getting the care that he's supposed to get, at least per his information. What he's telling her, what he's relaying to her, that he's going to get it done, but she's saying it's not being done. It's just like, so I wanted to just go get him this, that, and the other. And I said, don't get him anything. Don't get him anything else, because I know that she has also already given him $5 to go get a laundry card so that he could put money on the card so that his laundry could be done. That never happened. He never got the laundry card. He never did the laundry. Now, the other part of being his caregiver is that I have to kind of watch his money and where it's going, because another thing that has happened is that he was not paying his rent. Now, again, I said my father gets SSI. My father gets benefits every month because my father is a veteran. So he gets VA benefits every month, and he gets a decent amount for him. For a single man, no dependents, living on his own. He gets, and he's living in a senior building, so his rent isn't that much. And when I say not that much, I mean not that much. But his rent had not been paid in quite some time. So I was upset about that. I was upset when I got to Chicago that the rent hadn't been paid, that the illegal squatter was in the apartment, that his apartment was a mess, that it was dirty, that he had no food in the house. I was upset about all of these things. And then I started talking to my dad about what was happening. And my dad is the root cause of everything that is or isn't happening. He's so set in his ways that he doesn't want anything to change. He wants to be able to drink when he wants to drink, get high when he wants to get high, call the shots, spend his money however he wants to spend it. And that's all fine and good, after you take care of the things that you need to take care of. Because if your rent isn't paid, if you're not buying groceries, if you're not doing your laundry, then I am going to say that you're not in your right state of mind. That your mind is being altered and you're not thinking clearly. And if that is the case, then I'm going to have to declare you, what is the phrasing? Incapable of taking care of yourself, and force you to go into a facility. And that's not what I want to do. I don't want to force you to do anything, but that's what you're forcing me to do. So I've talked with the nurse. I've talked with the social workers. I haven't talked to the social worker today. I've talked with everybody that I can talk to. And everybody can help however I need them to. My dad has to be the one that says, all right, I'm going to let you do it. You want me to help you, but you don't want me to help you. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. So that is one of the reasons why I am so stressed and again, ready to crash and burn. I'm trying to take care of a man, one, long distance, but two, who's also so set in his ways that the stuff that he needs me to do, the stuff that he's asked me to do, he doesn't give me the room to do it. He doesn't give me the room to do it. And I'll talk more about my dad in a different episode, because I do have to talk about the illegal squatter. I do have to talk about his finances and what was happening with that, and a few other things. I also need to talk about why this was entitled, and I'll do that now, why this is entitled I Wasn't Ever No Ugly Man. So my overall relationship with my dad is one that is tense, but there is love. There is absolutely love there. I love him as my father, as the man who planted the seed. I do. I love him for the relationship that I was able to build with my grandparents and some of my aunts and cousins, because this man is my father. I attribute my great faith to his mother. I was able to see her as a true prayer warrior, one who, despite what was going on around her, persevered through it all, losing children, losing her husband, and all the other things that she went through. So I love and respect my father for that. But it's a tense relationship because, again, there are things that he wants me to do that he doesn't allow me to do because he is such a conspiracy theorist. When I say conspiracy theorist, I mean conspiracy theorist. He thinks that everyone and everything is after him. So a lot of times when I talk to him, it's very difficult because he starts talking in circles and code, and I don't know the code. I can't crack the code. When we first reconnected years ago, we reconnected because he knew of someone that needed a caregiver. He was supposed to be the caregiver, and decided he couldn't be the caregiver. He needed to be the caregiver for someone else. So I signed up with the agency that he was with so that I could be the caregiver for the person that he was initially supposed to be the caregiver for. And that's how we began to develop a relationship. And then a few years after that, we reconnected again, and we were talking about, well, actually not even a few years after that, during that same kind of time period, but probably within the next year, It wasn't the same year that we reconnected. We started talking about my brothers and my sisters, because I said to him I didn't want any of my children to have relationships with women and to find out that those women are actually blood related to them. So I had to have that conversation with him about my siblings and who they were and where they were and what happened with those relationships with their mothers. So we were talking, and he gave me some information. Then I went and spoke with my grandmother, his mother, and she gave me information. And I reached out to the siblings that they had the information on. So there is a total of 6 of us that my dad had information on. And I reached out to the ones that I could locate. So that gave me, and 2 of which I already knew because I had been introduced to them already. And then I found out, I recalled later on that I had been introduced to the other 2, or 2 of the others early on in my life. I had been introduced to them. And I have the image in my head still, where he picked me up from my grandparents' house and took me to this other house on the block, or near the block. And there was this little boy and this little girl outside playing on the sidewalk. I think one of them had chalk and they were drawing. But whatever the case was, he introduced them to me as my brother and my sister. And they have the same mom. And to my knowledge, with the exception of one other person, anyway, to my knowledge, those are the only 2 that have the same mother. And so I reached out to them. So there are 6 of us. There are 3 boys and 3 girls. I'm the oldest of all. And then I have a brother right under me, and then a sister right under him, and then a brother right under her. And then the last 2, they're really very close in age, like the same year, only a couple of months apart. So I want to say that he's older than her. And then she is the youngest of the 6. So I set up something for them to all come to Chicago, because at the time, of course, I was living in Chicago. I had set up something for them to all come to Chicago. Let's get together. It's been years since you've seen family. Come on, let's do this. And of all of the ones that I invited, only a sister showed up with her family. And I don't, for whatever reason, that's what happened. But we had a really good time. And while I was preparing for that, I was driving around with my dad one day to help him do some shopping, some clothes shopping. And we started having this conversation, this very candid conversation. And I said, so Dad, how many children do you have? And he said, well, to be honest with you, and I've never taken like a formal count, but I probably have somewhere between, no, he said I probably have over 20 children. I said, are you serious? And he said, yeah. I said, how on earth did all of these women allow you to reproduce with them? In order for you to get 20 children, you had to reproduce with several women. At this point, at least 18. And he said, well, your daddy wasn't ever no ugly man. I said, okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. You weren't ever an unattractive man. And you're also very charismatic. So you combine the charisma with the good looks, and you get what every woman wanted. And he was a vet. And he was a veteran. So you get what every woman thinks she wants until you get into the relationship with him. So I explained to him again why I wanted to know who my brothers and sisters were. because I have 3 children of my own. And again, I didn't want any of my children to get into relationships and find out later on that they're actually blood related to them. So he said he understood it, and you know, when he thought back on it, he knew that it wasn't necessarily the best thing to do, but he also remembered the scripture because, you know, my family is very religious, very into faith, but he got it to the scripture of, and I can't remember the book or the chapter, but it talks about the man having a full quiver, like the man with the full quiver is surely blessed or something like that. I'm gonna actually look it up right now. Psalm 127:5. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They shall not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate. And when I first read that scripture, it talked about the quiver being basically the man's home, domain, and being full meant having a lot of children, if I interpreted that correctly. And I was like, wow, so you kind of took that seriously, huh? And he said, yeah, why not? Why not take it seriously? I said, okay, fine. So what I have found out also in that is that my dad has been married twice. I knew about the first wife. I had a hunch about the second, but I wasn't 100% sure. But he verified that he did absolutely marry this woman. And I think this is the only other woman that had multiple children with him, somewhere around 2 or 3. And the only reason why I say I think is because I remember him introducing me to a woman at one point when he had a stint in the mental asylum. And that's where he met her. And they connected. He introduced her as his girlfriend and said something to me, if I remember correctly, about wanting to get married. And I was like, okay, whatever. Didn't think a whole lot about it. And a couple of years went by. And I knew that she had at least 1 child prior, because I remember him mentioning that she had at least 1 child prior. But when I saw her again, she had 2 younger children. She had 3 kids altogether, and 2 of them were fairly young, and they looked like me. And this is something that is, our genetics are very strong on my dad's side. All of us, with the exception of the 3 older siblings of my dad, all of us look alike in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's just the eyes, or whether it's the eyes and the nose, or whether it's the nose and the cheekbones, or whether it's the coloring, all of us, with the exception of, I won't say all, because one of those children had children that didn't look like the rest of us. He had 3 older sisters, and those 3 older sisters were by a different man, a different husband of my grandmother's, so they don't look anything like the children that she had after them. My grandmother had a total of 12 children, 3 boys and 9 girls. And I forget where my dad falls in the ranking. So I have an aunt that's actually a couple years older than me. Because when my dad, again, my dad was 15, my dad was 16, my mom was 15. And when my dad was fooling around, my grandmother was already, she had like a toddler running around the house. One of my aunts and one of my cousins are very close in age, like they're within months of each other, because my grandmother and one of my aunts, my grandmother and one of my aunts, yes, older aunts, were pregnant together. So they had children within months of each other. So yeah, my dad was really very proud of having so many children. not knowing where the rest of those children are. But he also was very frank in that he used to be a very abusive person. And because I did ask him what happened to all of these women and why he didn't have relationships with any of these children, and he said that most of the women were running from him because he at one point in time was a very abusive person, and they ran without telling him where they were going. I said, okay, sounds about right. Sounds about right. He does recall seeing one of them. He told me later on, seeing one of the children he thought very near where he lives, and but he didn't say anything because he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure. So yeah, that's how I am the caregiver for my dad. And that's a little bit of background into our connection with one another. I've already made his funeral arrangements. So when we actually have his service, I am curious to see if any of these children show up. I'm curious. So I'll talk about more in detail about my dad and the dynamics of being his caregiver, especially from a distance, a 900-mile distance, and what that looks like. And then I'll talk a little bit more about who my dad is as a person. And yeah, I'll do more about that. I'll talk more about that in a later episode. I won't tell you what the next episode will be because that might change, even though I have it all mapped out. But I know that I've got to put my dad in here at least one more time, and I know that I've got to put my husband in here at least twice. So we'll see. I got to switch some stuff up. So I'm not going to say, okay, so next week we're going to talk about, I can't, because it's going to switch up. It may switch up a little bit. As I've said before, I am the caregiver for my dad, for my husband, and for my 3-month-old Shih Tzu puppy, Rain. But I've also been a caregiver for my mom, for my grandparents, of course my own children, and just others in general. So these next few episodes are going to be very telling of what that looks like for me, what that has looked like for me, and where it's going. Yeah. So yeah, there you got it. There you have it. Being a caregiver for my dad, and now you kind of know why I have entitled this podcast Caregivers Crash, because it speaks to the fact that I am on the verge of crashing and burning. Later in the podcast series, I will talk about myself and what crashing and burning looks like, and why, and what I'm trying to do to prevent it from happening again. This podcast is one of those things. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to sit and listen with me, or listen to me rather. I'm grateful that I may be able to help someone in a situation that they're in as a caregiver. Not that our situations may be exact or are exact, but you might get a little bit of insight from all of this. And in one of these episodes, I am going to talk about getting things in order as a caregiver, what you need to do as a caregiver to make certain that the person that you are responsible for is truly being cared for. Like the legal stuff, like the power of attorney and the DNR, and if there is a will, communicating with other family members and friends about all that stuff. Yeah, I'll talk about that in another podcast, just in case you're not sure of what needs to happen, because I have heard many horror stories of caregivers taking care of someone, especially if they were family, and that caregiver thinking that they had everything in order, and then they find out nothing that you thought was going to happen is actually going to happen, because you had no legal right to do any of the things that the person that you were caring for told you that you could do, because it wasn't in writing. So yeah, that's it for now. Peace and blessings, and know that I appreciate you.